Dao De Jing Chapter 38. The paradox of virtue. Those who possess the highest virtue do not display it outwardly, and thus, in truth, they possess true virtue. Those who possess the lowest virtue, though they seem to follow the Tao externally, in fact, lack true virtue. The person with the highest virtue acts naturally, without force, without intention. The person with the lowest virtue acts in accordance with nature, yet with intention and calculation. The person of great benevolence acts without expecting a response, yet forces others to follow. Thus, when the Tao is lost, virtue emerges. When virtue is lost, benevolence appears. When benevolence is lost, righteousness arises. When righteousness is lost, ritual emerges. Ritual is the product of a lack of loyalty and sincerity, and it marks the beginning of chaos. The so-called wise are merely the superficial appearance of the Tao, and this is where ignorance begins. Therefore, the great person is grounded in sincerity and humility, not in superficiality or empty displays. They cultivate simplicity and avoid empty adornment. Thus, one should discard the superficial and embrace the humble, returning to true sincerity. Key thoughts and philosophical insight. 1. The paradox of true virtue. Laozi presents a striking distinction between true virtue, the highest virtue, and the hollow imitation of virtue, the lowest virtue. The truly virtuous do not feel the need to display their virtue. They act naturally, without force or calculation, and their virtue is evident not through their actions, but through their very being. On the contrary, those who act outwardly virtuous often lack inner sincerity, and their actions are driven by intention or self-interest. This paradox calls us to rethink our notions of virtue, reminding us that true virtue does not seek recognition, it simply is. 2. The gradual erosion of the Tao. Laozi outlines a process through which the loss of the Tao leads to a gradual degeneration of virtue and morality. When the Tao is forgotten, virtue emerges as a substitute, but it is a pale imitation. As virtue wanes, benevolence arises, but it is accompanied by forced action and coercion. From benevolence, righteousness appears, followed by ritual the outward forms of moral behavior, without the inner substance. Rituals in this context are seen as empty displays of moral action, a sign of a deeper spiritual decay. Laozi warns that when we lose the natural and spontaneous harmony of the Tao, we are left with mere forms that cannot truly restore order or peace. 3. Simplicity and humility as the foundation of true virtue. The great person, according to Laozi, is grounded in sincerity, simplicity, and humility. They do not rely on superficial appearances or external displays of power or virtue. Instead, they cultivate inner sincerity and reject the empty adornments of ritual and form. In a world that increasingly values showmanship and appearances, Laozi's advice to return to simplicity and humility offers a powerful reminder that true greatness lies in being grounded and sincere, not in seeking external validation or empty rituals. How Chapter 38 offers modern wisdom. In the modern world, we often face a tension between genuine inner virtue and the outward display of morality or success. This chapter offers a valuable lesson for today's society, where people often focus on appearances, whether in leadership, public life, or personal relationships. Laozi teaches us that true virtue is not about how we present ourselves to others, but about how we live authentically and harmoniously with the Tao. This chapter also provides insight into the way modern societies deal with power and governance. When the Tao is ignored and true virtue is lost, societies often substitute laws, codes of conduct, and rituals in an attempt to restore order. But these, as Laozi points out, are only superficial solutions that cannot address the deeper issues. In leadership, business, and personal growth, this chapter encourages us to seek inner transformation rather than relying on external forms or superficial rituals. In personal development, this translates to cultivating humility, sincerity, and authenticity, traits that are often overlooked in a world that celebrates outward achievement. By returning to simplicity and truth, we can find lasting fulfillment and bring about meaningful change in our lives and communities. Chapter 38 contrasts true virtue with its outward appearance and shows the gradual erosion of moral values when the Tao is forgotten. True virtue is subtle and unassuming, while imitation virtue is driven by force and calculation. The decline from the Tao to virtue, then benevolence, righteousness, and ritual, illustrates the degeneration of morality when society loses its connection with the Tao. Laozi's wisdom calls for simplicity, humility, and sincerity as the foundation of true greatness. This chapter invites us to focus on inner transformation rather than external appearances, offering timeless advice for personal and collective well-being.